Good morning. Welcome back to One Sustainability. We're kicking off day 4 of our 2022 Sustainability Conference. And we're joined here this morning, his afternoon, from Norway is Øistein Jensen. He is the Chief Sustainability Officer of Odfjell, and he is going to speak to us today about green shipping. Can we get there? Good day. Welcome from Norway.
Thank you.
Happy to have you here, and thanks for kicking off day 4. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Glenn, and thank you for the opportunity from One Sustainability to talk about this. The purpose for this presentation is to talk about green shipping. Shipping is one of the what we call the hard to abate sectors. There is no easy fix about this. I'll do my best and explain some of the risks, some of the challenges, and some of the opportunities related to shipping. Briefly about Odfjell. Odfjell is one of the biggest chemical tankers companies in the world. We operate a fleet of more than 80 of these beautiful vessels that you will see on the screen now. We are operating in all the major routes around the world. We have a 108-year-old history, and we are listed in Norway. Some of the products that we are transporting, they are some of the most hazardous products that is out there, and we transport them through some of the most fragile environments in the world, through the oceans. And that means something to us. That means something with regards to our responsibility for safety, for sustainability. And that has been an inherent part of the DNA of the company for a long period of time. So we transport life-saving medicine. We transport ingredients to food, industrial products that go into plastic productions, and various important materials important for the society. So that's why also we have sustainability really high on the agenda. And we really want to hand over both our planet and our business into the next generation in a very good condition. So briefly about the shipping industry. More than or almost 90% of all goods we use and surround us with every day has been transported on a vessel. And that means that the shipping is one of the most energy efficient ways, the most efficient way of transporting large volumes over large distances. And that makes shipping one of the most environmentally friendly way of transporting goods. But the shipping industry also represents about 2 to 3% of the global amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So that means that shipping is also a part of the problem. And that is something that we take seriously. If we look at some of the data that came up with the IPCC report this summer, we see that the level of greenhouse gas emissions from globally has just been increasing over a long period of time. We see that CO2 is one of the most important greenhouse gases, where we now have represents about 64%. But I think also the methane is also an important greenhouse gas that has been that high on the agenda. But today there are really no alternative to a combustion engine if you want to transport large volumes over large distances, and that's why shipping is a part of the problem, and we need to do something about that. And the amount of greenhouse gas that represents a problem, and it represents a problem for globally, but also for a company. And that drives climate change. And what we have seen, these climate change is not something that we expect going to happen. We have also seen examples of this happening this year. So this is just a couple of pictures from this year, from July this year. And this is the picture to the left shows a picture of Europe, and you see Spain and France there. And the purple temperatures are temperatures above 40 degrees. So there has been a lot of temperature records this year, and the effect that we are also seeing is that it has affected infrastructure. We see that there has been disturbances on railways, on roads, on airports, and tubes due to the heat. And if you look at the picture to the middle, that is a satellite picture of Pakistan. It was taken the 4th of August, and you see there's a lot of green. The 28th of August, you see that 1/3 of the country is below water due to the enormous amount of rain that came down. So the evaporation from other places in the world where we have seen major heat waves, though that water has to come down somewhere. So we see that the climate change is really happening, and it's happening today. And there has been a lot of the records this year, and this is just a slide prepared by the NOAA and indicating warm records this year. So we can mean what we want about climate change, but we see that this is happening, and it affects businesses, it affects people, and it affects society. So coming out of COVID, I think this is a good illustration showing what our perspectives are. We have been able to fight COVID, and I think that this is not still all over, but we are looking at a much bigger opponent. And I think that the guy to the right there, he has actually stepped into the ring. This is one of our major challenges going forward. So last year I had the opportunity to join the COP in Glasgow, and post COP we look at all the pledges and all the promises that was given from all the politicians in order to achieve a 1.5 consistent target in order to achieve the Paris Agreement. And we see that with all the pledges and targets in place, this is not enough. This is not sufficient enough. So we need to close that gap. And we're talking about volumes of 20 gigatons of CO2 that has to be reduced. So we're looking at a substantial reduction of CO2. And as I mentioned, shipping is an important part of this. So how is shipping doing? So are we doing any better? No, we're not. Shipping was not included in the Paris Agreement, and shipping is only regulated by the UN and the IMO. And the IMO, with the existing targets that has been presented by the strategy that was presented by IMO, will not take us where we need to be in order to achieve the 1.5 degrees target. So with the existing targets in place, we see that shipping will only contribute to the increase in temperature and increase in climate change. So that's why we in Odfjell have set ourselves a separate target to be zero in 2050. That is ambitious targets, and it's going to be tough, and I'll explain a little bit more about that later. So the European Union, where Norway is, we have this target of in EU, they have a target of 2030 of 55% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1990. And in 2050, they want to be carbon neutral. If you look at the IMO, as mentioned, the UN body, a maritime body, they were looking at with their levels of ambition, what they call this. It's not even called the targets, it's called the level of ambition, where they have a 40% reduction in carbon intensity and absolute reduction of 50% in 2050 compared to 2008. So the intensity target is a good measure to show the trajectory and development. But in the end, the climate doesn't really care about intensity. It cares about the number of molecules in the atmosphere. So the intensity is something that you can achieve by just building bigger vessels. So the intensity target is just a step on the way towards zero. And that's why we in Odfjell, we thought that was not enough. So we have set a target for a 50% reduction, and we want to be zero in 2050. We were one of the first companies actually setting these kind of targets for a shipping company. We have later seen that other companies have followed on this. But we think that zero is the only solution. And we also hope that the IMO, with their new strategy expected next year, that they will be aligned and come up with targets and levels of ambitions close to the targets that we have set in Odfjell. So what's the problem, and why is that difficult to achieve? I think that this is important to understand. A ship that it is built to last for 20 to 30 years. And it means that the decisions that we are taking today will be a vessel that comes into the on the water in some years, and it will last for 20 to 30 years. And in order to be green, when we're talking about green shipping, we think of this as, we cannot look at this in isolation. We cannot look at only the ship from what the fuel that we put on a tank till we put the effect out on the propeller. So we need to look at our total contribution as an industry. And that means that we need to look at this from a well perspective, all over to the wake, from not only from the well to tank, but from the tank to wake, in order to be green. So we need green fuel, we need the green infrastructure, and we need ships that are able to run on green fuel to be really green. And that means that the production element as well needs to be green going forward. And this this problem has many different owners, not only ship owners, but also infrastructure owner, fuel producers, and also governments that prepare renewable energy. And I'll come back to the renewable energy dilemma in order to make a green fuel. And that means that this is actually what's top on the agenda of all ship owners and the shipping industry. So this is a part of the Global Maritime Issues Map that was published now in August. They have questioned, they have asked a wide portfolio of leaders within the industry, what's the major issue for your industry in the years to come? And we see on top of that agenda, it's the decarbonization of shipping. How to do that, and what to do. And we see that new environmental regulation is also really up there, together with the geopolitical tension that we see at the moment. So we see that decarbonization, environmental regulation is really high on the agenda. And when we're talking about decarbonization, we're talking about alternative fuel. And it's important to just understand what is an alternative fuel. Today, a ship will run on heavy fuel oil or a marine gas oil, compared to a kind of a heavy version of diesel. And what is the alternative? Is there an alternative to run with a fuel that with less emissions? Yes, it is, but I'll explain something about it. If you look at this table, we look at various different alternatives for fuel, and the numbers here that represents the effect that you get out on a propeller compared to what you put in. So if you look at the marine gas oil that we are using, the MGO, that means that with an 50% average thermal energy efficiency, the engine must be fed with 2 energy units to deliver 1 unit at the propeller. And when you're adding the production of the MGO, well, that means the production rig, transport, refining, and final distribution to the ship. That includes to deliver 1 energy unit on the propeller. We need to use 2.4 energy units on a well-to-wake basis. And when we're looking at alternatives, as an example, e-methanol is a methanol that has been produced by electrolysis, which is a green fuel. And we see that the energy density of that fuel is much less. That means that we will need 6 units of energy in order to get 1 energy unit energy out on the propeller. And that tells us that the fuel that we are using today, it's not very expensive compared to the others, at least, and it's very efficient. It's very high energy efficiency, and it also has a lot of given it's a fossil fuel, it will also contain a lot of CO2 and emit a lot of CO2 when burned. So that's why we look at alternative fuels. And when we're looking at alternative fuels, not only from a tank to wake perspective, but from a well to wake perspective, because that is important. And I think that this is important from an industry perspective. We cannot be seeing this in isolation, that we take on board a very polluting fuel, and when it's put on our tank and we burn it, and we can say that we have been zero. With the total amount of emissions to the atmosphere, it's much more. So as an example, there's a lot of discussions about ammonia. If you're looking at green ammonia, that is a fuel that will, in a well-to-wake perspective, be about 90% less CO2 emissions compared to traditional gas oil. And that has to be produced green. And if you look at the alternative, an ammonia today based on natural gas, which is the most ammonia that is produced today, is produced by natural gas, that will cause an actually increase in amount of CO2 with about 45%. So that means that it's really no easy solution. So that's why, given this table, we will see that, okay, the solution would probably be to have a renewable or a green ammonia. So let's look at what green ammonia really is. So in order to produce green ammonia, as you will see on the box, the green box up to the left there, you need a green hydrogen. And in order to produce green hydrogen, you would need to have a renewable energy. And that renewable energy, that will come from various different sources, mostly known as solar and wind. So you need to have a renewable and green energy source to produce the green hydrogen. And if we look at the projections, this is done by DNV and IEA estimation going forward, we see that the real development of renewable hydrogen production, that will come in a much later time. So that means that this will take time going forward. And in order to produce a green hydrogen, that will take a lot of time. And if you look at also the renewable energy available today, most of the energy that we're using today, surround ourselves, is actually fossil energy. And only 4% of the energy that we use today are renewable. And that means that renewable energy is a scarce resource. So if we were looking at transforming the shipping industry over to using green ammonia, let's say we could do that tomorrow. If you looked at the amount of volume of oil consumed that we were using in our shipping industry in 2020, that will require 203 million metric tons. In order to run with the same with green ammonia, that will more than double the volume. And in order to produce more than 400 million tons of green ammonia, you would need about 80 million tons of hydrogen. If you're looking at the global hydrogen production today, that is only 120 million tons. So that means that for shipping, it will require about 80 of those 120 million tons produced hydrogen. And if you look at how hydrogen is produced today, so it's only 0.3% of the total hydrogen that is produced that is actually produced green. So that means that this is a challenge to get access to the green hydrogen. So if you're looking at what that will require of energy, so if you want to transform the global shipping industry to running on a e-fuel like e-ammonia, that will require about 5,500 terawatt hours. And that's about 50% of all the non-fossil electricity production in the world in 2020. There will be a scale up of renewable energy, but we don't see that in that scale. So that means that half of all green energy has to be used in order to solve a problem that represents about 2%, which shipping does. And that is really a political question, whether that makes sense or not. And so renewable energy will be a scarce resource. So then the question is really if it's smart to use it as a fuel. And this is just an explanation of the dilemma that we are seeing. Because from renewable energy produced from a wind turbine down to hydrogen, there will be an energy loss, let's say from 20 to 30%. And from producing hydrogen to producing methane or methanol, that is about another 30%. And when you're burning that in an engine, that you will lose about 50% in vibration and heat. So that means that if you're going to produce a fuel from a renewable energy source, you will only get about 20% of the energy, and 80% of that energy is wasted. So if you compare that to alternative use of green energy, you will see that you will get much more effect if you're able to use that energy directly to the grid, as for example, replacing oil heating and heat pumps and also electrical cars. As an example, you can see that we will get to 8 to 9 times more energy efficiency if we use that energy to replace coal compared to transferring shipping into ammonia. So that means that this is also some of the dilemmas for shipping. We don't believe that is to make shipping green is the most efficient thing that you should do immediately. But we think that it has to be done, but probably we will not be the one that is first. So that means that from our ship owner perspective, we will need to do whatever we can in order to make our ships as energy efficient as possible. But I think that the access to green energy is one of the most under-communicated challenges that we see so far. So there are many different policies and measures in order to go green, and I will not go through all of this, but there are economic instruments like market-based measures that will be needed, because the new fuel that will be available for shipping will probably be much more expensive. And there is a significant competitiveness gap between the fossil fuel and the alternative fuels at the moment. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that the industry is stimulated either by their direct regulations or by economic instruments or by regional and national measures, and also some voluntary actions. As an example of this, we have this green corridors. And green corridors is basically that you decide on a special route between A and B, and you incentivize a transport or a vessel or a route with either a ferry or a liner that goes between A and B, and the different ports and different countries on each side agree to the to support that vessel to test out whether that ship can be run on a zero fuel for that route, for that green corridor. So this is something that is really high on the agenda, and we see that this is a really hot topic. We see that many different ports now are looking into this, and I think this is something that is one part of this of a solution with many different solutions. There are no one single solution for fuel. There are no one single political solution, but this is just a part of it. And I think to establish green corridors is an important part to scale up and demonstrate that green shipping is possible. So how do we think about this in Odfjell? Well, this is our strategy, and this is what we are thinking, and we're trying to make it very simple. And we look at it from a sustainability perspective. We are including sustainability as a part of our strategy. We wanted to take a leadership on sustainability, and we wanted to use it in our advantage. We want to make sure that we have the right talent and we are able to grow our business. So the way we are doing this, we are looking at this from a materiality perspective. So in our annual report that is available online, you will see our materiality assessment. And in the materiality assessment, we are looked at various different kinds of ESG topics to see what is important to us. Remember the slide that I presented from the global maritime issues map. So this is our materiality assessment. And then we address these different topics both to our stakeholders and reporting, but also internally how we work with these topics. And as you will see on this climate risk is really one of the top agenda for us. And we use climate risk assessment as a fundament for our strategy. We use the TCFD model, looking at the transitional risk and physical risk, and see what does that mean for our strategic planning and what kind of financial impact will that have. And we look at also the opportunities. What kind of opportunities does this represent to us? And that also goes into our strategic planning. And we have just completed that for this year now, and that will be a part of our updated strategy. And it drives the fleet transition and growth strategy, how we are developing and working on our vessels. So with our fleet, we see that we need to do a lot of renewal and retrofitting and technical upgrades, but also operational matters like monitoring and speed optimization and operational excellence on how we are operating our vessels. That is something that we're looking into, like better routing. And we also need to do an analysis of big data set in order to make sure that we are able to do fact-based decisions. We also need to use data and to make sure that we are able to drive that twin transition of digitalization and decarbonization. So we have been able to allocate and capture high quality data in order to drive our decarbonization efforts. So how have we done so far? Well, we have been able to reduce our carbon intensity so far with more than 39% compared to what we did ourselves in 2008. Compared to the benchmark, we are almost at 50% compared to our industry. And we do this small and large decarbonization measures. So we need to take all the small retrofits, the big retrofits, the operational elements, the digitalization. We look at how we are routing our vessels, how we optimize waiting time, transporting, everything like simple thing like cleaning the propeller is important things, and it gains a couple of % extra, and that saves a lot of energy and saves a lot of emissions. And we use digital technology in order to make sure that we are well aware of what we our vessels, that we can optimize and make our efficient as possible. So far, as I mentioned, we have been able to reduce our carbon intensity with about 50%. So there are many new regulations upcoming. I see that I'm probably struggling a little bit on the time here, but there are many new regulations that will coming. We'll see that the Fuel EU Maritime and the emission trading scheme will be an important new regulation coming up. And basically what the emission trading scheme will do is that you will need to pay for the CO2 emissions. And that will be a cost that we will transfer to the customers, because that cost has to be pushed out through the value chain. And that means that it will incentivize the charter to select a shipping company with less emission. And I think that that is going to be one of the key drivers for shipping going forward, together with the scope 3 focus. And we see more and more companies are looking into the emissions of their value chain. And our direct emissions is a part of other companies' direct value chain emissions, like the scope 3 emissions. And that is important. We see that there is upcoming regulation on this, where companies need to report on their scope 3 emissions. And that will also incentivize ship owners to reduce emissions, and will incentivize charters to select ship owners with a very, very efficient fleet. So our strategy going forward is to be fuel flexible, to be zero capable, and we do whatever we can. I've demonstrated the dilemma of access to green energy. We need to be as energy efficient as possible with our existing fleet, and we're looking at other alternatives like fuel cell projects. So then the last question is it a sunset or a sunrise for green shipping? And I think that there is a lot of obstacles, there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of challenges that lies outside of our responsibility. But I think that it is our responsibility to do whatever we can in order to make sure that we are mitigating the risks of climate change, that we are doing what we can in order to improve the efficiency, and in the end to be a zero. And that concludes my presentation there.
Thank you, Øystein, very much. Tremendous, beautiful slides, great images. Tremendous work, tremendous progress for you guys. I love the green from well to wake. I think that's really impressive. It also shows, the well to the tank part really is going to involve, partnerships, alliances, right? I mean, there's a certain dependence there for, the getting the materials to you guys in order to go from tank to well, right? So some partnerships and things perhaps in your future. I was just curious, one quick question, as a listed company in Norway and recognizing what's going on here in the United States with the SEC, any listing standards types of disclosures, or any Norwegian security laws on this area from a disclosure standpoint that you guys have been working through?
Yeah, so we have been working through both the Euronext and Nasdaq have presented their guidance. They're not very specific. And we're looking at trying to collect various different kinds of best practices, and we have actually made our in Norway we have made our own ESG guidelines, and that is based on the expectancies of the Nasdaq, of the Euronext, and also the two different standards like the GRI and the SASB. So these standards, we have merged that into one, and if our annual report is available on odfjell.com. And you can see how we have done it. But the Norwegian Ship Owner Association has also made the guidelines for this. So we are closely monitoring and trying to do best practices. But then again, everyone is asking a lot about standards. But I think that the materiality assessment is what is important, because you need to kind of satisfy your stakeholders. If that is an important thing for your stakeholders, that's where you should collect the data and report.
That's right. Thank you for bringing materiality into your presentation. People sometimes people forget that. But listen, thank you for joining us today for One Sustainability. It's Øystein from Odfjell in Norway. Great kickoff presentation for our Thursday. Thanks so much. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.